whatever changes we have if the town has changes. Is that how you saw it, Mr. Shebel?
The intent was hopefully that both of us would agree upon it at the same time and have the same plan in front of us that would be approved. We did have a separate meeting with the town manager to go over some of his concerns and tried to address his concerns with the changes that you had before you to cover that. But he still has to go through his committee again and review those with them and see if there's anything that might come back out of there, as well as presenting that back to the entire town council and see if there's any questions that are going to come out of that, as well as his public hearing to see if there's anything. Doesn't necessarily mean because of public comment you're going to change your plan. What we're required to do is write down who had the question, their name, address, and then we have to respond to each of those questions that we have answered those and attach that as part of that plan as it goes in.
Mr. Chairman, might I?
Mr. Master, excuse me. What's the possibility, and why is November the 3rd such an important date for the town having to approve this plan? Why could we not meet sometime in October and come to an understanding and an agreement and make sure that we both agree to the plan and that be adopted, at that point, and maybe have a public hearing and what have you?
I think a joint meeting is an excellent idea. The November 3rd date is the day of our regular town council meeting in November.
Okay, so you don't meet in October?
We do, but we have not had our public hearing yet, and I don't know if what changes the consultant will have. So we have not made any. We have not had any opportunity to review any changes.
But at least we could possibly meet and come to an understanding that we are in agreement with these changes and that you have no further changes to make in the plan itself, and at least
Let's do that.
We would have that agreement among ourselves.
I think that's an excellent idea, sir.
Yeah, the odds are we could go ahead and do it now and there'd be no changes with the town and everything would be wonderful, but just in case, you meet again October 6th, which is the first Thursday in October. You haven't, I take it, advertised for your public hearing.
That's correct.
Which means your public hearing won't come until November 3rd, which is the actual deadline. But if we have a joint meeting, which looks like it would be October 25th, we would at least be able to, make some sort of motion to approve our side ahead of that November 3rd deadline, because, whether it's true or not, the possibility of us losing any grant funding is not a good idea to me. So that's the thing. I think we'll try to schedule this joint meeting on the 25th between the town and the county. If we can't do that, we have 2 meetings before then. We'll probably adopt it before that. Is that procedurally, that's the safe thing? I'd like to make sure.
Mr.
Chairman, I'll withdraw the motion just to get the discussion over with, because really and truly, though I really want to make this statement. I don't believe that all the discussions we're having makes one iota of a difference in passing a plan.
Yeah.
And I really don't want to get into a situation where we're putting in things late and things like that.
That's the late part is my concern. I think you're exactly right. Plan. Then there are some points with the procedural part. We're going to try to schedule. If you're going to withdraw your motion, Mr. Akers withdraws his second. We're going to try to schedule this meeting, the joint meeting, October 25th. We will approve our plan then, and then you'll have an opportunity to know what concerns we have, or we'll know what concerns the town has as far as going forward. So we'll do it then. Okay?
And so then we'll vote on our plan the night of the 25th.
Right. Yes. And we'll be in plenty of time to take care of the November 3rd deadline.
But my question was to Mr. Master, why do we have to wait until the end of October to have a joint meeting?
We can schedule that at the board's convenience. And also, let me just note that in contacting DEQ, If there's a problem with the deadline, I wouldn't rule out the scheduling of a special meeting for town council.
That is what I was going to ask, is the fact that, we have special meetings here quite often, and I know the town council can do the same thing. My question is, why can we not look at trying to schedule something on one of our two board meetings early in the evening before we meet at 6 o'clock?
Or at 6.
Or at 6.
And then we start at 7:30.
Absolutely,
Okay.
and get the process over with.
All right, we're moving on from this item. We are going to ask staff, Mr. Manster, if you can work with Mr. Parton. We'll try to schedule this joint meeting as soon as possible. We meet again in 2 weeks. If the town can get together then that quickly, that'd be great. If not, the last date will be October 25th, and we'll go from there. Okay, but you'll let Mr. Parton know. We'll schedule accordingly from there. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we've got agenda item number 6, proposed amendments to planning and zoning related fee schedule. Mr. Fincham.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, you have before you the public hearing tonight to propose fee schedule for staff suggested changes to the planning, zoning, and building fees within our department. These fees were provided to you at your previous board meeting in which you authorized us to go ahead and advertise the fee schedule for public hearing. The fee schedule is always a balancing act, and we understand that. Many services that we provide aren't directly related to the issuance of a permit, but it's to assist the public. But where we do provide services that are fee-based or fee-supported, the board has, in previous years, directed us to try to recoup as much of those costs through fees as possible, thereby reducing the impact to the taxpayer of the county. I'll limit my comments to 2 areas. In terms of the building permit fees, I think we tried very hard, as evidence in our last cover memo to the board, to minimize the fees to the resident as much as possible. We provided a survey of, I believe, 5 other comparable jurisdictions. We were the 5th lowest out of the 6 jurisdictions, including Caroline County, in terms of the total estimated cost for a 1,500 square foot house under our fee schedule. I think the area where perhaps the growth trend in the last decade showed that we were behind was in terms of the overall development activity, subdivision, site plan review, and the ongoing costs to service development within the county. We have a number of developments that are still active, yet we are not collecting any fees to cover the cost of services for the ongoing inspections and monitoring of those projects. And one of the more significant changes in the proposed fee schedule is to try to recoup some of those ongoing costs, such as erosion and sediment control inspections, development compliance with proffers, with construction requirements, et cetera, that under the current fee schedule, those services are being borne virtually in their entirety by the county taxpayer. The board has seen the fee schedule, and with that, I don't have any more comments, and I'll address any questions that the board may have.
Thank you, Mr. Fincham. At this time, board members have any questions, Mr. Fincham, before we do the public hearing?
I do.
Mr. Akers.
Mr. Fincham, we have shown numbers here based on a 1,500 square foot house. In Ladysmith Village or in Pendleton, what is the or in Belmont, what is the average square footage being built in those 3 communities?
Early on,
I'm talking
many,
about today. I'm talking
today?
about now. Early on is in the past, and I can't do anything about that.
probably 1,800 square feet would be the small on the low side, and that's your townhouse, two-story townhouse.
But the average house is about probably...
Single family,
Yeah.
the smaller single family is probably about 2,000 square feet.
The example you've shown us here, for $450 on a 1,500 square foot, what would the average be for a 2,000 square foot home? Are there certain numbers that are plugged in regardless of the size of the house?
Well, for example, your building plan review is based on, like, for an example, 15 cents a square foot. So if you have a 500 square foot increase, then that portion of the permit would increase by 500 times 15 cents. Some of your other basic permits, for example, might not increase based upon square footage.
That's fine. You know, I'm just trying to figure out what the cost of the average increase in cost are going to be for the average home that's being built today versus a year ago or 2 years ago, because, you know, the housing industry has taken a hit in many, many respects. And we've done everything we could to try to rejuvenate that industry in Caroline by, you know, delaying proffer payments and delaying the, well, not proffer payments, but delaying the connection fees and utility fees, things of that nature. So we've done everything we can do to try to jumpstart that industry in Caroline, and I'm just having a problem.
A 2,000 square foot house would be about $550 versus the $475.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Fincher, Mr. Akers. We will declare the public hearing to be open for the proposed amendment to planning and zoning fees. Is there anyone who'd like to speak regarding this matter? Is there anyone who would like to speak regarding this matter? Is there anyone who would like to speak regarding this matter? Hearing none, we will declare the public hearing to be closed.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
For the record, we actually did an outreach effort with some of the local builders. We previously provided a copy of the proposed fee schedule to building industry representatives. So we have contacted.
And the answer was? They agreed with the fees, or they thought that
I think generally speaking, they understand the need to cover departmental cost. I think they also recognize that compared to other localities, our fees are lower than many of our neighbors surrounding us. So,
yeah, I mean, there's a distinct difference between understanding and accepting. I understand I don't have any hair. I don't like it. That may not necessarily, you know, be the right analogy, but there are things you understand and you don't like. So, okay, I was hoping for a better answer, but all right. Board discussion? Mr. Seeley?
What is the impact if we didn't raise them? If we left them where we were, where they are
Projected
now?
revenue you have now versus what we had before.
then we would continue to collect all the fees under the current fee schedule. And if there is a difference between our budget projection versus what we actually take in, if there is a reduction there, then that would be covered by other general funds. And I won't sit here and say that it's an exact balance, Mr. Seeley. I can't tell you that. It's really going to be dependent on development activity. Right now, a lot of our service calls are for property maintenance issues. Some of your, for example, some of your foreclosed homes are becoming rental units. They aren't in the best shape in the world, so we're getting a lot of requests for property maintenance inspections versus new construction.
Do we charge for that?
The initial inspection, no, but if there's deficiencies that are identified based upon the inspection and corrective action necessary, then yes, we collect a fee for the permit to correct those deficiencies through the permit process.
What about, Mr. Fincham, do we show in this schedule of fees for those type of things that you just mentioned? What page?
Okay. The initial inspection, okay, somebody calls in a complaint.
You're talking about maintenance property
Right.
issues, and also you mentioned a few minutes ago about sediment control, erosion control
Yes.
issues. Where are they at in this?
Erosion and sediment control is on page, let me get the right page here. Ten.
Page 10. And how about the maintenance issues?
Now, again, the initial property maintenance inspection is not, that's a complaint. We go out, we're obligated to go out and investigate the complaint.
I understand.
If we actually find code deficiencies, then to correct those deficiencies, the property owner has to come in and get a building permit, okay, where we look at, if they put an addition on without a permit that meets the threshold for a permit, then they have to come in and we issue them a building permit, and the fees would be calculated based upon the level of work that had to be done to get it compliant.
There's some things in the fee schedule that I have no problem with, but for overall, just going through and increasing all of the fees, again, where it may hurt the building industry. We've often compared ourselves to Spotsylvania and Hanover and things of that nature, and those particular areas, Culpeper, when we're talking about comparing ourselves to growth and development. I don't think that's the case. We're competing against King George at this point. Let's be honest about it. They are the ones that are getting the Walmarts and the other commercial development in King George. So I think we have to look at King George as probably our competitor in that area. I see theirs as the lowest, and about $150 lower than what we're going to be. So that's where I have a concern. I have no problem with maybe the sediment, erosion sediment control issues that you have to constantly go back and check on years later after the development has finished or the development of that particular property has been completed. But to go through and to increase every fee that's in our schedule, I do have a problem with.
Okay. We are not proposing to increase every fee in the schedule.
Well, it's probably 90% of them that you're proposing to increase or to implement charges that haven't been in the past. I'm assuming, because under the old column there's nothing there, and under the new column there's a fee there.
That would be a fee.
Right.
That would be a fee,
So
yes, sir.
I would say 50% is there.
How does the board feel about delaying any action on this? And we'll ask Mr. Fincham to do a little bit more analysis on just a couple of factors we're looking at. The reality is, if there's no development, no growth, it's really not going to affect your bottom line anyhow.
Correct.
If there is a lot, then there will be a point in time that you could actually come back to us and say, I am spending X amount of extra dollars in this particular area, just like you've done already, to emphasize again to the board that we need to take this action. But I feel what I'm getting from the rest of the board members is a sense to at least delay this right now in the hopes that the housing industry will come back a lot sooner than later, and that we will not negatively impact any additional growth. Is that pretty much the feeling I'm getting from everybody else? Okay. Ms. Fincham, if you don't mind, we'll do it. Was that, you said something? Okay. If that's the case, we'll just, we're going to delay our action here. We're not going to increase the fees now, and we will rely on you to come back and tell us that either I need more people because I'm doing all of this, or I'm spending this much extra money again. And I think we know at least how many planned houses we have coming. So as that develops, you could let us know. Okay? Thank you, sir.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I do think
Keep going.
he needs to move ahead with looking at some of the
That's what he's gonna do.
issues here and bring back to the board sooner rather than later. I mean, don't take this as a blanket, no, we don't want to do anything. I don't believe that's the case here. The case is we want you to come back in 30 days or at the first meeting in October or something like that with some
That's it.
individual
That's fine.
increases.
As a planning liaison, can I run those by you before I come back to the board?
I would hope that would be fine.
Are you the planning liaison?
Yes, I am.
You didn't tell us this was happening beforehand?
He didn't tell me.
Thank you, Mr. Fincham, and thank you, Mr. Akers, for that levity. We needed a break. Okay. Mr. Fincham, don't go anywhere because you've got the proposed amendments to the Caroline County zoning ordinance and subdivision ordinance related to the designation of urban development areas, which we had a first meeting before. Mr. Fincham?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, at your last meeting, you authorized staff to go ahead with the public hearing on the proposed amendments to the zoning ordinance. As you will recall, the General Assembly adopted legislation requiring certain localities, including Caroline, to adopt urban development areas as part of their comprehensive plan, and set forth certain standards related to those urban development areas. They also mandated that we amend our subdivision and zoning ordinances as necessary to support that legislation. The proposed amendment before you tonight is strictly to amend the zoning ordinance to reflect the UDA requirements in the planned shopping center. We had a discussion at the last meeting about the floor area ratio. I've included some examples of definitions as well as some illustrations of how floor area ratios are calculated. And basically, it's the ratio of the land area to the building improvement. And a ratio of 1 would be, for example, a 100-square-foot building on a 100-square-foot lot. And hopefully those illustrations address the questions that the board had.
And again, Mr. Fincham, the only place this would have any effect in the county would be
Carmel Church. In that specific portion of the Carmel Church growth community planning area designated as Carmel Church Station.
That's the only place in the entire county where this takes effect. Any questions of Mr. Fincham? All right, thank you, Mr. Fincham. We will declare the public hearing to be open. Is there anyone who'd like to speak regarding this matter? Is there anyone who'd like to speak regarding this matter? Is there anyone who'd like to speak regarding this matter? Hearing none, the public hearing is declared closed. How does the board wish to dispose of this agenda item? Motion would be in order.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion.
That was for approval.
Yes, for approval.
Mr. Akers makes a motion for approval. That was Mr. Underwood who made the second.
That's correct.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. I'll give you a 10-minute break. We're going to take a 10 real-time minute break, and we'll be right back in 10 minutes. Veen? Mr. Schiebel is here. So, agenda item number 8 is unfinished business, discussion of a date for the county to begin operating Caroline Pines water system. I made a mistake, did I? I did make a mistake. No. No. Right easement. Okay, we're good. All right, agenda item number 8, Mr. Shebel, discussion of the date for the county to begin operating the Caroline Pines water system.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we've talked several times as far as the progression of the Caroline Pines project and the county when is the actual date that the county would take over ownership. There's some benefits and as well some negatives to the county taking over ownership. Of course, we take over ownership and it's our baby, and whatever happens, happens, and we have to fix it. But at the date that we take it over, that's going to happen at any time anyway, so we're just delaying the inevitable on that end. We have already borrowed the money and are getting ready to start making payments on debt service. This fiscal year, we do not have any. It'll actually start July 1 in next fiscal year before we make the first payment on the loan. However, we can start collecting the funds that are set aside for the availability fees of the $2,800, and that's been estimated at about almost $5,900 that we would collect in the first 6 months to go towards debt retirement. And then we also have the fees that we would collect from the operation of the system of just over $106,000 estimated for the usage out there. So there's about $160,000 that would bring into our coffers if we were to operate that system starting January 1 through the remainder of this fiscal year. Other things that we have to do is, in the project itself, there was not any funds in there to install meters, or it was not part of the actual project. Mr. Borshuk was saying that the $3 million, there was money to cover that, so we still have to put meters in there. And that's really what's going to be pushing the date that we can take that system over. Once we have meters in place, then we can read those meters and start the billing process. And I think really that's going to be the key date, I think, on my end of what it's going to take me to do that. The county attorney's office is drafting up an agreement for the payback over the 5-year period for the availability fee, and we're going to have to get those signed up and get accounts set up for the 381 current customers. And we've got staff prepared to be able to do that in a timely fashion. Again, the biggest holdback really is going to be getting the meters installed. If the contractor installs the meters, of course, he has to the end of his contract to get the meters installed if we were to allow him to do that. If we were to let staff do that, of course, we're trying to get in the position to put them in as expediently as possible. I'm not quite sure where to go from here. You know, we've talked about this several times, and I know the board, maybe I could answer questions at this time more than anything. You know, I think staff's recommendation is that we take the system over January 1. It gives us the $160,000 of inflow of cash. It gives us time to start looking at that system prior to us actually providing water to the system to find out what is actually wrong in the system. We know that we're going to have to chlorinate some of the wells in there before we can use them with the county system. It gives us time to start looking at that before the actual connection's made, and we're using those back and forth to make those wells compatible with the county system. So by taking over, it does give us the authority to be able to go into that system, start making repairs, upgrading things that need to be repaired to move forward.
So I think the question for me is the definition of taking over versus when we actually provide water to Caroline Pines.
That's correct. Basically what we're looking at, we've talked with the Caroline Pines Property Owners Association, explained to them that, you know, the project has been pushed back until May time frame to get the contract done and to actually have county water being able to be provided to that facility. However, they're still having issues down there operating the system. They do not have a full-time operator. They have a contractor that comes in once a week. The health department is breathing down their neck to get some things done. However, at the same time, they know the county's around the corner to taking it over, so they haven't done a lot on their end to enforce anything needs to be done.
Right there for a second. If the health department is breathing down their neck to do some things,
that's correct,
and the county takes over their system sooner than we're finished, that implies the health department will then be breathing down our neck.
That is a correct statement, sir. Some of the things that need to be done is, one, they need a full-time operator to be able to overlook the system on a daily basis.
That's agenda item 10.
That's correct.
Don't get ahead of yourself.
They almost need to be together. I mean, both of these kind of go hand in hand in a lot of ways. However,